She unknowingly entered the CEO's room. What he revealed changed everything forever. It was just another Tuesday for Lily, the weight of deadlines and the flicker of fluorescent lights merging into a blur as she moved through the heaving office of Becker Advertising. The din of keyboards echoed against the walls, a stark backdrop to her racing thoughts. Balancing the demands of work while raising Jamie was like walking a tightrope, and today, the risk felt higher than ever. As she rounded the corner to deliver documents, her hands suddenly turned the knob of an office door that had been barely ajar. In an instant, she was thrust into a world that felt light years away from her reality. She stumbled into David Reed's office, the formidable CEO, a titan of the industry, a man whose very presence seemed to swallow the air around him. The first pulse of shock coursed through her. The polished mahogany desk, littered with accolades and the heavy scent of success, constricted her breath. This was a realm where individuals with dreams like hers were often dismissed. But the roots of the past stirred as she realized he was not only a powerful executive but also a friend of her estranged father. Overwhelmed, her mind raced. Could she bridge this chasm between her father's legacy and her current existence? As pleasantries slipped into nostalgia, David spoke of her father's ambitions, the dreams that had flickered out like a candle, snuffed ambitions that could have been hers. Each word pulled at the threads of familial loyalty, a deep yearning ignited within her. Yet along with this glimmer of hope was the tightening grip of doubt. Was she ready to drag her family's name from the depths of obscurity? The implications churned disturbingly in her gut, contrasting sharply against the life of diligence and hard work she advocated for Jamie. "Lily, you need to decide what this means for you and your family." David's words enveloped the room, igniting friction within her heart. She could feel the pulse of her reality bills piling up and Jamie's future resting precariously on her shoulders, all colliding with the temptation of reclaiming a legacy she yearned for yet feared. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Stepping back into her cubicle felt like slamming a door on possibility. The contrast was painfully stark. The whispers of co-workers, the judgments she felt without proof, screamed at her. Was she destined to remain the office assistant, the hard-working employee easily ignored and overlooked? The realization that her efforts might not be enough to secure a promising future for Jamie seeded doubt within her, and she felt that she was at an impasse. The sparks of ambition igniting in her heart were challenged by the heavy weight of her realities, and her resolve wavered. As she sat idly, staring at the screen with numbers that reflected hours of effort, a relentless tension built within her. She thought of Jamie's dreams, his bright future overshadowed by the shadow of her limitations. Right when clarity began to break through the cacophony of her mind, a knock on the door jolted her back. David stood there, urgency etched on his face, and her stomach flipped. "Lily, we need to talk about what this means." The unspoken truths hovered between them, charged with anticipation. Her breath caught momentarily as she registered the gravity of this moment. The door was closing behind him like a threshold between her past and a potential future that could either lay paths of hope or walls of despair. What awaited her now? Doubt clawed inside her chest, demanding resolution that was yet to come, as she stood on the precipice of a life-altering decision. Lily's heart raced as David entered, his presence commanding yet strangely inviting. The door clicked shut, amplifying the muffled sounds of the outside world. The warmth of authority radiated from him, urging her to speak, to fight through her paralyzing uncertainties. "Lily, I know this is unexpected," David stated, taking a seat opposite her with an intensity that made the air crackle. "But your father brought me into his dreams. I see the same potential in you." His words hung in the air, weaving through her fog of self-doubt. She swallowed hard, grappling with the reality of being compared to her father. But I'm not him, she whispered, the weight of her truth heavy in each syllable. I can't live up to what he could have done. Why can't you? You have the same fire. You're here, working hard every day. But you're not taking any risks, he challenged, his eyes piercing through her reluctance. Because there are too many stakes, she replied reflexively, thinking of Jamie and the life they had built together. What if I fail? The silence that followed felt electric, jittering with the electricity of possibilities. David inclined forward, his voice low and deliberate. Failure isn't the end unless you let it be. What if you start defining success for yourself instead? She felt the stirrings of something deep within her, a spark of defiance, of yearning. This wasn't merely a push from David, it was an invitation to reclaim her narrative. The moment began unspooling, right there in the confines of her office. The fluorescent lights above flickered slightly, imbued with the urgency of her internal conflict. Lily began to recollect her father's determination, the way he would dive into challenges head first, unafraid of the consequence. What do you see in me? She asked, taken aback by the vulnerability in her own voice. You remind me of him, of who he could have become, David said matter-of-factly. Not just in ambition but in resilience. But you need to embrace that power yourself. It starts with a decision. His words began to shift something tectonic inside her. Doubts were still there, but they warred against a nascent courage burgeoning forth. Could she stand up in a world that often sidelined her? She wasn't just a mother or a worker, she had dreams buried beneath layers of obligation. Help me, she breathed, the words felt terrifying yet liberating as they slipped from her lips. Suddenly, the concept of support transformed from abstract to tangible. Help me navigate this. I want to learn. David's expression softened, pride flickering behind his professional facade. Then let us build a path together. You'll need to step out of your comfort zone, but you have every capability to climb higher. Their conversation evolved, with ideas swirling like autumn leaves caught in a gust. He spoke of workshops, mentorships, and networking opportunities, the very elements she had brushed aside as beyond her reach. Each suggestion ignited her burgeoning hope with the fire of possibility. Yet, as excitement mounted, a shadow of doubt crept back. But what about Jamie? She asked, her voice reduced to a whisper. I can't fail him too. Lily, pursuing your aspirations won't just change your trajectory, it'll show Jamie what resilience looks like in action, David countered, the conviction in his voice unwavering. The weight of her fears pressed heavily against her resolve, blending courage and apprehension into a churning sea of ambition. Could she juggle her responsibilities while rekindling her father's legacy? The knot of determination and trepidation twisted tighter. As the conversation wound down, Lily felt a new identity forming around her, like a cocoon that promised transformation. Yet, with every ounce of resolve came a poignant reminder that change would not come easily. The moment of clarity shifted, she was at the brink of choices that could lead her down avenues unexplored. Are you prepared to make a leap? David's question lingered, punctuating the childhood echo of her father's dreams. The air tinged with tension, she stood at the crossroads of plans and impulse, yearning for a decision that would resonate far beyond today. Behind her, the future beckoned, shimmered with uncertainty yet alight with the promise of potential. Her next step loomed before her. Would she embrace it, or retreat into the safety of her past? Let us find out, she whispered, steeling herself for what lay ahead as the door of possibility opened wide before her. What would she find on the other side? In the days following her conversation with David, Lily felt a continuous hum of energy coursing through her. Her routine remained unchanged on the surface, the morning coffee was still brewed, and Jamie's lunch still packed each day, but an internal shift had transformed her approach to every task. Each mundane activity became imbued with a sense of purpose, as if she were preparing for a grander performance, all leading toward the leap David had challenged her to take. One afternoon, during a lull at work, she found herself staring blankly at her computer screen, her mind swirling with possibilities. The workshop David had mentioned loomed large in her thoughts, a tangible opportunity that could breach the wall of self-doubt she had built over the years. Yet as she contemplated reaching out for more information, anxiety curled tightly in her chest. She glanced through the office window, watching as colleagues emerged into the sunlit courtyard laughing, both relaxed and unburdened. A pang of envy struck her. Those were moments she had relinquished, burying herself in the responsibilities of motherhood and duty. Why should pursuing her dreams feel so aspirational? The tension coiled tighter. Stop thinking of all the reasons not to, she admonished herself. There was no going back to her old self. She felt the flicker of that dormant ambition growing more insistent. That evening, as she prepared dinner, Jamie's laughter drifted in from the living room. He was engrossed in a video game, completely oblivious to the mental struggles pulling his mother in opposite directions. Just as she set the table, an idea crystallized in her mind. Perhaps, instead of viewing her ambitions as selfish, she could frame them as a gift to Jamie, a way to inspire him to dream without limits. With renewed clarity, she sat down at the kitchen table when supper was done, grabbing her laptop and searching for that workshop. The moment she found it, her heart raced, not out of fear but anticipation. If she signed up, it would mean stepping outside her comfortable bubble and confronting the very fears that had kept her anchored down. The leap was becoming less abstract and more like an essential step toward her future. But even as she clicked the registration button, uncertainty settled like a weight on her chest. The thought of being the center of attention stoked her anxiety. What if she failed? What if she was just averaging like everyone else rather than shining like her father once did? She resisted the compulsion to retreat into her old patterns of thought. That thought lingered, teasing a deeper fear. It plagued her. She might not be just a failure in her own eyes but an underwhelming successor to her father's name. She pushed that downward, inward, while her thoughts unraveled. What did it even mean to be a daughter? To be compared to someone she admired whilst feeling the weight of that legacy? Lily? A soft voice broke through her contemplation, stirring her from the whirlpool of anxious thoughts. It was Jamie, peeking around the corner. "Can we have a game night?" She met his curious gaze, and the sincerity of his request dissolved some tension. "Sure," she replied, mustering a smile. As they settled on the couch with snack bowls ensconced between them, a sense of peace invaded her spirit. Game nights felt like simple escapes, yet tonight they served as mental fortification. Even in the midst of uncertainty, she realized moments like this mattered. They anchored her heart as she moved toward her aspirations. That night, as they played on, her mind danced around the idea of the workshop. Her fingers twitched on the game controller, mirroring the jolt of exhilaration within her. Yet, that small flicker of doubt flickered again. The intensity ramped up. What if she stepped into that arena and found only failure? The tension of unresolved thoughts and untested courage swelled within her. Would she prove her worth? The elation and fear intermingled until they erupted into a sense of rebellion against the complacency that had defined her life. As Jamie cheered for his victory, Lily took a deep breath, feeling the stirrings of fortitude compounding inside. "Tomorrow," she whispered under her breath as the game flickered on screen. "I'll call David. I'm ready to know what's next." And with that decision echoing in her mind, the path before her began to unfold in vivid color, illuminating the very future she was destined to embrace. The question remained, how would she manage the tumultuous feelings that came with facing her own greatness? The following day arrived with an unsettling amalgam of anticipation and dread. Lily awoke earlier than usual, the early morning light spilling through the kitchen windows, a tangible reminder of the opportunity she had committed to the evening before. Yet the tranquility was shattered as her mind filled with thoughts of the workshop. Would she manage to stand up and speak? What if her ideas seemed trivial? The internal debate escalated. After preparing Jamie's lunch, she pulled out her phone. Heart racing, she dialed David's number. Each ring echoed her own insecurities, the possibilities of what could follow swirling chaotically. When he picked up, his warm voice disarmed her anxious chatter. "Lily. I was just about to reach out to you." His enthusiasm kindled something within her, a mix of courage and trepidation. I'm interested in the workshop," she stammered, the weight of her inconsistency lurking just beneath her words. "Fantastic!" he exclaimed. "You're going to love it. We'll dive deep into strategies that challenge your perspective. But remember, this is about growth, not perfection." His reassurance was a brief balm for her simmering anxieties, and he outlined the details of the workshop, his excitement infectious. As the call ended, Lily placed her phone down, reeling from the net of possibilities. "Growth, not perfection." She repeated the phrase, letting it settle. Each thought volleyed back and forth as she oscillated between fierce desire to ascend and crippling self-doubt. It was no longer merely about her ambitions, it entwined her ability to inspire Jamie. Determined to embrace this momentum, she allocated time before work to revise some ideas for the workshop. The tactile sensation of pen gliding over paper was a grounding experience. Words transformed into visions, sketches of aspirations merging with practicality. Yet every stroke was tainted with lingering uncertainty, permeating fears of inadequacy nipped at her heels. Once at the office, she found it tough to focus. Colleagues buzzed at their desks, engaged in animated discussions. The normalcy around her felt dizzyingly normal. By midday, her hands trembled ever so slightly as she tuned out the chatter. And then she spotted Emily, the sleek, all-business coworker, standing across the way, chatting confidently with a group of colleagues. That unsettling pang of comparison struck again. Is that what success looked like? The polished appearance, unwavering confidence, seemingly endless capability? Before retreating into deeper self-doubt, she forced herself to stand tall, drawing a deep breath. Lily remembered her goal not as a lofty ambition, but as something attainable. She had to embrace her uniqueness, her values shaped by motherhood and experience. Those were her strengths, after all. At lunch, sitting quietly in the cafe, Lily pulled out her notes for the workshop, aiming to focus. The words morphed into something else entirely, a manifesto of who she was, infused by the moments shared with Jamie. She scribbled down goals on the back of an old receipt, sealing her intentions in ink. She could be an example of pursuing passions despite fears and failures. Returning to the office, buoyed by her lunch's meditative focus, she resolved to toss aside the self-comparisons, reminding herself she did not need to fit a mold. Her determination deepened as she envisioned what she would bring to David's workshop, a unique perspective forged through her struggles. Yet, as she approached the end of the workday, a message pinged on her phone from David, an invitation to meet him before the workshop for a briefing. Excitement pricked at her nerves, and a sliver of doubt emerged. What if she revealed too much? What if David saw her as an imposter, or worse, a blip on his radar? Those questions crouched in the back of her mind, but this was her chance, wasn't he it? Determination surged again, compelling her to confront those fears head-on. As she finalized her notes, contemplating how to present herself in the CEO's office, the weight of it all hit her. This wasn't merely a meeting. It was a pivotal moment to step into her potential. The room was an arena, not just for showing her knowledge, but for asserting her identity. But a new anxious whisper crept in, what if he didn't see the worth she believed she could offer? With one last glance at her hastily written words, she steeled herself, taking a deep breath. She would soon face David and herself. Embarking on that journey, she faced a truth. The moment of truth was fast approaching, and she had to choose how to respond when it did. Would she hold her ground or falter under pressure? Lily stepped into the conference room, her pulse intensifying with each heartbeat. The familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with polished wood and leather, grounding yet disorienting. The large windows framed a view of the skyline, a reminder of the heights she aspired to reach. But her eyes remained fixated on David, seated casually at the head of the table, radiating confidence, as though inviting her to step into the same light. "Lily," he greeted, his smile bright. "I'm glad you could make it. I was looking forward to discussing your ideas." Every inch of her felt hollow, a mere shell wrapped around a growing anxiety. "Thanks for having me," she replied, her voice infusing a tremor of uncertainty into the space. "Let us dive in," David said, gesturing for her to take a seat beside him. The room felt suddenly smaller, an arena surrounded by judgment and expectations. She pulled out her notes, her carefully penned thoughts echoing her pursuit of growth. Yet, the moment she began to speak, the words tangled in her throat. Would they resonate? Would he see the wisdom behind her experiences, or were they nothing more than ramblings from a struggling mother? "Your perspective on balancing work and life is invaluable," David encouraged, leaning forward. Her heart ebbing and flowing, she uttered a few tentative sentences, slowly building momentum as she shared her insights. Each statement she made chipped away at the whispers of inadequacy haunting her mind, each word a stepping stone toward recognition of her own worth. But doubt hung vividly in the air, lingering like the scent of lingering coffee. David listened intently, nodding, but moments of silence whispered louder than his agreement. What if he was merely being polite? What if he'd rather have his time occupied with someone more established? Midway through her explanation, David interjected, "You have a unique understanding of how motherhood shapes priorities. Have you considered developing this into a broader framework for our team?" Her breath caught in astonishment. Could this idea be more than just a flicker of inspiration? I hadn't thought about that," she stammered, excitement sparking in her veins, igniting a conviction she desperately desired to claim. "Why not build a proposal?" he suggested, his expression earnest. "Something that can be included in our upcoming strategies session?" The rush of possibility surged through her, and for a moment, anxiety ebbed, replaced by a pulse of empowerment. Here was an opportunity not just to be heard, but to influence and innovate. "Yes, I could expand on how our values as parents can inform our approach to leadership and management," she said, the words tumbling forth with newfound clarity. As she spoke, she noticed a shift in David's demeanor, a newfound respect dawning in his eyes. The doubt that had shadowed her earlier began to dissipate, revealing a realization: it was her journey, shaped by her choices and experiences, that formed the backbone of her value. Yet, even amidst her triumph, an unsettling awareness settled over her. What if this was merely a facade? What if, when the moment passed, she was left grappling with self-doubt again? The fear threatened to spiral, but she resisted, anchoring herself to the present. David leaned back, his gaze assessing yet encouraging. "Lily, your perspective could truly redefine how we approach team dynamics. We need authenticity in our leadership, and I see that in you. Don't underplay it." The weight of his words bolstered her confidence, but they also ignited a flicker of responsibility. What if she stumbled? What if her ideas didn't hold water in a larger context? "Thank you," she managed, a breach of vulnerability and gratitude. But a deeper contemplation lingered. If she embraced this new path, what would it mean for her balance between home and ambition? As they concluded their meeting, David's enthusiasm for her potential buoyed her spirits. Yet uncertainty hung the threshold of a new chapter was in sight, but it also veered into uncharted terrain. Would she fully embrace her newfound role or retreat to old comforts? With thoughts swirling, she stepped back into the corporate world, the hum of conversations ricocheting off the walls. The office buzzed around her, yet all she could feel was the unceasing thrum of her own heart. Reality bore down on her, heavy with choices and implications. The pathway to authenticity had opened, yet it was rife with risks. As she lingered in the doorway of the conference room, the next step loomed. Would she seize the moment and craft her narrative, or would she succumb to fear of the unfamiliar? The answer could change everything. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity, and every moment was a delicate dance between anticipation and dread. Lily found herself unable to shake off the exhilaration of that meeting with David, yet the weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders like an invisible cloak. The seed of her proposal had been planted, but would it grow, or would it wither under scrutiny? Each evening, surrounded by the laughter of her children, she often drifted into thoughts of her ideas. Would the team accept a concept rooted in her personal experiences? What if they found it inadequate? As she tucked her kids into bed, their innocence reminded her of her initial motivations. Everything she desired was for them. But deep within, self-doubt was a persistent companion, casting shadows on her enthusiasm. In the following week, she began drafting her proposal. Each outline and bullet point transformed into a mental battlefield. The adrenaline of creation battled her nagging fears. Would her voice echo in the corporate corridors, or would her ideas dissipate in a fog of indifference? The office buzzed around her as usual, laden with the chatter of presentations and the clattering of keyboards. Yet, this time it felt different. Every glance from her colleagues held a thread of expectation, a palpable weight that shimmered in the air. She caught herself observing David during meetings, studying his confident posture and the easily flowing dialogue he maintained. He was a lighthouse guiding ships to harbor, but she didn't know if she would ever reach those safe shores. Finally, the day arrived for her to present her draft to David. The conference room transformed into an arena once more, and as she walked inside, the familiar scent of coffee that once comforted her now ignited her anxious energy. David was already seated, a mixture of intrigue and encouragement etched across his features. "Lily," he started. "I'm excited to hear what you've come up with." Taking a deep breath, she launched into her presentation, navigating through each point with a growing sense of purpose. The foundation of her ideas was built on the intersection of motherhood and leadership. How her life experiences provided profound insights into time management, empathy, and resilience. As she spoke, she could see a flicker of engagement radiate from David, a spark that stoked the embers of her confidence. Yet, within her, a storm brewed. What if, once she finished, the spark fizzled out? Her thoughts raced ahead, weighing his potential critiques against her determination to project strength. What if he dismissed her concept as mere sentimentality? When she concluded her presentation, a silence settled in the room, stretching into a tautness that made her stomach clench. David's gaze fixed on her, and she noticed a slight furrowing of his brow as he processed her ideas. Time ticked painfully slow, amplifying her anticipation until it felt unbearable. Then, a smile broke over his face, genuine and warm. "This is impactful, Lily. You've tapped into something that could change how we approach team engagement. I see real potential here." The tidal wave of relief crashed over her, filling her lungs with air she hadn't realized she'd been holding. But as those waves subsided, a ripple of concern emerged. Was this praise merely the surface of deeper evaluations yet to come? "Let us refine this and get you the exposure you deserve. We'll present it at the next leadership meeting," he added, oblivious to the chaos swirling in her mind. Excitement mingled with trepidation. Sharing her work with others would invite intense scrutiny. Her heart raced. Was she truly ready for this level of visibility? The conflict within her flared. Could she remain authentic while standing under the watchful eyes of her peers? As they discussed the next steps, her thoughts wandered. This wasn't just a professional pivot, it was an invitation to redefine her narrative. Yet, in the throes of mixing personal depth with professional ambition, a gnawing fear crept back in. What if her ideas didn't resonate with the larger group, exposing her vulnerabilities in a way she couldn't retreat from? In that moment of vulnerability, she stood at a precipice, poised to either take flight or plunge into self-doubt. The opportunity stretched before her like a gaping chasm, too enticing to resist but too daunting to cross. Would she draw strength from her experiences and rise, or would she falter at this pivotal moment? The tension in her chest tightened, emphasizing her realization. Stepping into authenticity bore its own set of risks. She was at a critical junction where her past could either empower her or hold her captive. With the next leadership meeting looming ahead, she braced herself for not just a presentation, but the unveiling of her true self. Would it be the dawn of her evolution or the dusk of her fears? The following days were a relentless tide of preparation and reflection. Each sunrise felt like a countdown, one that opened her eyes to the reality of her impending presentation. Lily's thoughts swirled with anticipation and anxiety, a cocktail that both thrilled and terrified her. She immersed herself deeper into the nuances of her proposal, using the quiet moments between her responsibilities at home as a sanctuary for creativity. Every night, after her children were asleep, she returned to her draft, altering phrases, rearranging points, and questioning every assertion. Would her perspective truly resonate? The doubt slithered back in, whispering harsh judgments, manipulating her thoughts, threatening to unravel her hard work. It was in these late nights, under the dim glow of her laptop screen, that her resolve was tested. Am I even qualified to present these ideas? The question echoed as she scrutinized her notes. But then she recalled the weight of her experiences, the uniqueness of her insights. She grappled with the realization that her voice stemmed from a place of authenticity, a vantage point few in her corporate landscape occupied. This thought invigorated her, spurring her to proceed. Meanwhile, the office felt like a pressure cooker, where every conversation held a weighty significance. Colleagues' approving nods now seemed loaded with expectation. Lily was hyper-aware of her surroundings, listening intently to snippets of conversations that hinted at the judgments coming her way. The looming leadership meeting felt like a chess match, with each step scrutinized and analyzed. On the eve of the presentation, she engaged in a family ritual with her children's story time, followed by whispered dreams for tomorrow. As they settled into their cozy spots, she paused, overwhelmed by gratitude and fear. Tucking them in, she reassured herself. Everything she did, every struggle, every late night spent refining her proposal was for them. But what if she didn't deliver? What if the hopes she harbored for her career frontiers she envisioned breaking were as fragile as the dreams she whispered to her children? The next day arrived, bringing with it a blend of excitement and dread. Standing at the entrance of the conference room, Lily felt the eyes of her colleagues fall upon her, a collective hold of breath waiting for her to make her move. David's familiar smile cut through her anxiety as he leaned in closer. "You're going to do great. Just remember, this is as much about you as it is about the ideas." His reassurance, though intended to comfort, ignited a firestorm of internal conflict. Was she ready to be the face of her vision? The woman who challenged corporate norms and championed a more human-centric approach? The weight tethered her to the ground while the ambition clawed for freedom. As she entered the room, she caught sight of the leadership team, seated like judges awaiting a performance. A pang of fear gripped her heart. Perhaps it was naive to wear her emotions on her sleeve, to advocate for change in a landscape built on tradition. Lily took her place at the front, mental reminders echoing, "Speak from the heart, listen to your intuition." The moment came like a breath trapped in her chest, but pushing through her hesitation, she began. With each point she articulated, she could feel the tension in the room shift, like air releasing from a tightly wound balloon. She shared her experiences candidly, illustrating how they shaped her understanding of leadership. The silence that had previously loomed over her was replaced with nods and even murmurs of agreement. But just as she began to settle into her flow, a familiar voice cut through her momentum. "Catherine," a senior manager whose sharp critiques often struck fear into the hearts of her colleagues. "But Lily, can you clarify how this isn't just emotional rambling? Without data, how do we justify these changes?" The inquiry pierced her confidence, each word a reminder of the walls constructed around change. Would her interpretation of vulnerability transform into a weakness in the eyes of those she sought to persuade? Lily felt the air thicken as she evaluated her response. Deep down, she was confronted by an uncomfortable truth: if she wanted to champion her vision, she'd need to confront not just Catherine's skepticism but her own fears of inadequacy. Would she retreat into a safe response, or risk showing the strength forged in vulnerability, her truth? The weight of the moment loomed large as all eyes turned to her, an expectant audience anticipating her next move. Would she rise in confidence or backpedal, undermining her own voice? And in that moment, She knew she was on the brink of something transformative. This wasn't just about a proposal, it was about paving the way for who she was becoming. Would she seize this chance and unveil her truest self? The path ahead had never felt more complex, layered with potential breakthroughs and perilous pitfalls. But she was ready to face it head-on, to navigate the storm brewing within. The decisive moment awaited her answer, and as the silence enveloped the room, she inhaled deeply, summoning the essence of her journey, determined to stand firm in her authenticity. Lily took a steadying breath, an attempt to anchor herself amidst the swell of uncertainty. She felt the walls of the conference room lean in, towering and formidable. Catherine's question echoed in her mind, but it was time to confront that doubt. To reclaim the narrative, she had to communicate with clarity, not just data but the weight of lived experience. "I appreciate your question, Catherine," she began, her voice carrying more conviction than she felt. "What I'm proposing isn't merely emotional. It's about reshaping our approach towards collaboration and empathy in leadership, which ultimately drives performance. Data can appear cold, but behind every statistic are real people whose experiences matter." She could see subtle shifts in the expressions around her. Eyes softened, and some colleagues leaned in, curiosity piqued. Lily took the risk of personalizing her perspective further. "When I went through a challenging period last year, it was the support of my team that not only kept me on my feet but pushed us to innovate. I believe if we cultivate an environment rooted in emotional intelligence, the data will follow. It will skyrocket." The room vibrated with a new energy, palpable yet uncertain. Tentatively, she was beginning to feel the ground shift under her in a way that pulled her upward. It dawned on her that she wasn't just advocating for an abstract concept, she was sharing a piece of herself, a facet that had, until now, lived quietly in the shadows of her professional identity. "Let me show you some data," she continued, retrieving her laptop and pulling up graphs that illustrated the success of teams who prioritized emotional well-being in the workplace. "Here's what we've seen in other organizations: when emotional comprehension is at the forefront, the overall success metrics balloon." As colleagues scanned the visuals, Lily felt an unexpected wave of relief. This was the blend she sought: data alongside narrative, her dual worlds intertwining harmoniously. There was a moment where uncertainty flickered in Catherine's stern gaze, a flicker of acknowledgement that suggested nothing was black and white. "What about the risks?" Catherine pressed, but it felt less like a challenge now. Instead, it echoed curiosity, an opportunity for a deeper discussion. "Every change carries risk," Lily admitted, meeting Catherine's eyes with newfound resolve. "Staying stagnant is equally risky. We can either evolve or become obsolete. I believe we can manage that risk by nurturing a culture that embraces feedback, where our mistakes translate into learning experiences." The room was no longer seated as passive observers. Engaging nods and murmurs of agreement cascaded around her. It felt oddly intimate. She wasn't just presenting anymore, she was having a conversation with her colleagues, inviting them into her vision. But amid the cascade of encouragement, an unsettling thought crept back into her mind. What if the buzz of approval faded as quickly as it had surged? What if, when the moment of decision came, the leadership team sidestepped the emotional appeal entirely? Just as she solidified her stance, another voice emerged from the back. It was Mark, the CEO. The figure quiet for most of the meeting, he was now leaning in, intrigued. "Lily," he began, eyes glinting with appraisal, "you mentioned supporting each other in complex times. Can you elaborate on how you foresee implementing this culture, especially with teams that are resistant?" The weight of his inquiry churned within her, testing her ability to traverse previously unexplored territories. It was one thing to propose a vision, it was another to delineate the pathway forward. "I think it begins with vulnerability," she replied, her pulse quickening. "If we model openness, we invite others to share their concerns. Trust is seated in those honest conversations. Workshops, mentorship programs, and open forums are steps we can initiate. But ultimately, it's a cultural shift, one that takes time." The realization dawned. This was the wedge she had been striving for. Catherine's skepticism transformed into an ally through probing questions, and now Mark's inquiry opened a new level of dialogue. But with every inch of progress came more weight to bear. As discussions unfolded, Lily felt her inner conflict simmer. Would they embrace this idea wholeheartedly? Would her words sustain the change she envisioned, or would they fade into the ether of corporate hesitance? The stakes were rising, pushing her deeper into the arena of challenge and introspection. In expressing her vision, she understood all too well that true change required more than charisma and statistics. It challenged the comfort zones of those around her, including her own. And within the tension of the moment, she could feel the threads of possibilities weave closer together, propelling her forward into uncharted territory. The time had come, as Mark's gaze intensified, leaving her teetering on the edge of a new commitment. How deep was she willing to go to ensure her voice reverberated through the hallways of their organization? Each question layered upon the last, amplifying the urgency of her next response. Would she seize this opportunity to bind her journey to their future, or risk shrouding her vision in silence once more? With her heart hammering against her ribcage and her breath hitched in anticipation, Lily knew she was at a pivotal crossroads. The truth waiting to be voiced had the potential to transform everything: the fabric of her career, the essence of her influence. Would she step into the storm, ready to reshape the very foundations of their leadership culture? All eyes awaited, her next words hanging like an untriggered spark in a powder keg. The silence in the conference room was suffocating, a canvas stretching taut with expectation. Lily sensed the weight of scrutiny, an invisible mantle draping over her shoulders. Mark's question lingered there, demanding an urgent and thoughtful response. She could feel the intensity of his gaze, as if he were an anchor pulling her further into uncharted waters. Taking a breath, she fought the impulse to retreat. To implement this culture, we first need to address perceptions, she began, her voice steadying with determination. People fear vulnerability because it's often misconstrued as weakness. We have to redefine what strength looks like in our leadership. It's about creating safe spaces where employees feel valued and heard. Lily watched her colleagues exchange glances, their expressions shifting from skepticism to contemplation. If she were to move them, she needed to illustrate the clarity behind her vision with real-world examples. Consider the outcomes from other sectors that embraced this ethos. Teams that opened up channels of communication saw significant improvements not just in job satisfaction, but in creativity and productivity as well. Statistics are compelling, but they can also be misleading, Mark interjected, his tone curious yet cautious. What if we introduce initiatives, but the response is tepid at best? How do you measure success without having set clear expectations first? Her heart raced. Mark's probing questions were valid, but they cut through her confidently crafted narrative, exposing vulnerabilities she hadn't prepared for. We measure success through engagement scores, feedback cycles, and project outcomes, she replied, refusing to dissolve into doubt. But more importantly, we gauge success through the shift in our organizational culture. We can celebrate small wins and learn from our struggles. Each step forward is a commitment to the journey, not just the destination. The lengthening silence invited her to elaborate further. She yearned for buy-in but fought the urge to over-explain. It was time to be bold. We could pilot this approach with one department, a safe test zone where we gather tangible feedback. If it scales, we have proof that empathy fuels productivity. If it doesn't, we refine and adjust. What if no one wants to participate? Catherine asked, the edge of her skepticism remained but softened. The fear of rejection is often louder than the desire for acceptance, Lily countered. But we start demonstrating the value first. Let us treat this initiative like a grassroots movement. Success can reframe the narrative. It's easier to join a ship that's already sailing than to push against the current. With every word she uttered, an inner fire ignited within her, propelling her forward despite the nerves that threatened to diffuse her clarity. The responses were beginning to ripple through the room, encouragement mixed with resignation were evident in her colleagues' body language. Yet, another voice flickered in her mind, What if her vision hadn't captured their imagination? What if they preferred the comfort of the status quo? Lily, Mark said, leaning closer, his interest genuine, we are behind you. But what happens when the first challenges arise? Resistance is a natural part of this process. Are you prepared for that? It was a pivotal question, one laden with the implications of her newfound responsibility. A wave of acceptance rushed over her. Resilience is crucial. We need to welcome objections as learning opportunities. We can't avoid discomfort, it's part of growth. If we approach adversity openly, it fosters a sense of belonging that binds us, rather than divides us. Emboldened by a sense of clarity, she continued, moreover, I want to invite the team to be part of this conversation, to take ownership of their roles within it. If we shape this together, we transform challenges into collective triumphs. The room felt transformed. There was warmth swirling in the atmosphere, identification with her call for change. She could see it reflected in gentle nods and the softening of expressions. There was hope hanging in the air. Even as this moment of clarity illuminated her path, the uncertainty remained. Doubts clawed at her from the edges. What if her vision didn't resonate beyond this room? What if their collective enthusiasm waned when faced with real-world challenges? Lily steeled herself, she understood the pricing of vulnerability. The clock ticked on, driving her heart to race anew. There was still the lingering question: was she prepared to lead them through the storm? Would her commitment match the demands of the journey ahead? As she met Mark's eyes, a fierce resolve crystallized in her mind. She was uncovering the strength of her purpose. With it came a bold realization. This was more than just a proposal, it was her legacy at stake. The next step was clear. I want to make a formal proposal for our first pilot initiative, she declared, the words escaping her like an incantation. The energy in the room shifted, anticipation crackling through the air. But would the enthusiasm translate into tangible action when the challenges surfaced? How far was she willing to go to ensure that this vision became an operational reality, not just an idea born of idealism? With every gaze now fixed on her, she took another breath. The weight of expectation pressed down, but for the first time, she embraced it, ready to step into deeper waters, where her voice could echo far beyond these four walls. In the days that followed her presentation, Lily experienced a profound transformation. The groundwork she laid began to solidify, not only with her leadership team but within herself. Every morning brought renewed clarity, each sunrise a signal of her commitment to revolutionizing the workplace culture at Becker Advertising. Gone were the days of self-doubt and inactivity. She had actively chosen to forge a new path both for her career and for her family. On a warm Thursday morning, her proposal for a pilot initiative was set to be reviewed at the next weekly leadership meeting. The anticipation simmering within her had become a force of energy propelling her forward. She began daydreaming about new possibilities, how creating a compassionate workplace could ripple across both her professional and personal life. The more she envisioned that transformation, the more fortified her resolve became. That afternoon, David walked into her office, an encouraging smile breaking through his typically composed demeanor. I've been hearing wonderful feedback about your presentation and the approach you proposed to the team, he stated, leaning against her desk. It takes bravery to stand up and advocate for change, especially when it requires rethinking traditional paradigms. His words validated her efforts, but more importantly, they underscored her growth. She realized she had transitioned from a hesitant employee to a voice of influence, and identity she was beginning to embrace wholly. Thank you, David. Your support has meant a lot to me, she replied earnestly, a newfound confidence embellishing her tone. The leadership meeting was set, and as she prepared her final notes, the spark of authenticity and intention seemed to fuel her further. Not only was she advocating for a cultural awakening within the company, but she was also crafting a narrative congruent with her journey as a mother, leader, and woman. On the day of the meeting, she entered the room with her colleagues. The air was charged with potential. When it was time for her to present the results of her initiative, she felt a steady pulse of anticipation beating in rhythm with her heart. Presenting the feedback collected from the pilot program, she highlighted its positive impact. As she spoke, she saw her audience lean in closer, their expressions transforming from skepticism to genuine intrigue. More than just productivity, she articulated, this pilot initiative fostered trust among team members. It cultivated an environment where vulnerability and shared experiences became sources of strength. The discussion that followed was dynamic and engaging, with her colleagues throwing in ideas to amplify the program's scope further. To her surprise, Catherine voiced her admiration. "Lily, I didn't expect this level of engagement. It's inspiring to see how your vision is taking shape," she admitted, her voice devoid of the sharp edge it once carried. That affirmation felt monumental, a direct challenge to the obstacles she'd overcome. Moments like this crystallized her self-worth. This was more than proving herself to others, it was about owning her journey. As the meeting concluded, David announced an official implementation of the initiative throughout the company, a structure for their new vision anchored in compassion. Cheers erupted around the boardroom, and excitement crackled in the air, a collective acknowledgement of the path they were choosing together. In the weeks that followed, the initiative flourished. Team members were engaged, feedback sessions held, and a tangible cultural shift began to emerge across the offices. It was exhilarating to witness, yet Lily remained grounded in her core motivation, demonstrating resilience to Jamie through her actions. One evening, as she returned home, she found Jamie engrossed in a new book about perseverance. He glanced up as she entered, his eyes bright with admiration. "Mom, I'm reading about how to keep trying even when it gets hard. Just like you." A rush of warmth enveloped her. She understood then that her growth was twofold, not only was she transforming the workplace, but she was nurturing a legacy of strength and tenacity in her son. This was the achievement she craved, not just professional recognition but forging a path for Jamie that taught him about resilience and the importance of pursuing dreams regardless of circumstances. In that moment, Lily stood taller, her heart swelling with a profound sense of satisfaction. She embraced her new identity, a trailblazer in a corporate space once tinged with doubt for her. Each step she took now felt defined and purposeful, illuminated by a beacon of self-assuredness. She had successfully recalibrated her position both at work and in life. As she tucked Jamie into bed that night, she was filled with a sense of peace. Transforming Becker Advertising was no small feat, but in doing so, she had also redefined her self-worth. She had not just conquered her professional hurdles, she had emerged powerful and unyielding, destined to carve additional paths of impact. "Never stop pursuing what makes you afraid," she whispered before planting a kiss on his forehead. For the first time in a long time, Lily felt balanced, fulfilled, and limitless, ready to embrace whatever opportunities lay ahead. This was her moment, her well-deserved achievement, and it felt sweet. Now, it's your turn to support this journey. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss any more exclusive emotional stories that will inspire and challenge you. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, showing that you value the path to growth and transformation. Comment your reactions and theories about Lily's inspiring journey and how her story resonates with your own life. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion, reminding them that true strength lies in persisting through trials and believing in their own story. Don't wait even one more second to share.